Well, hello, good afternoon, and welcome to Automotive Management Live. The last couple of years have been particularly good for fleets and leasing companies selling cars, but much more challenging in the retail environment. Values remain higher than 2019, despite sort of recent market contractions and corrections. However, margins available and the lower levels of stock, particularly in the 0 to 3-year-old cars, really have to be managed carefully. So I'm delighted to say that we've got two experts here today to address these issues with us and to look at the future used car market, the implications for dealerships, and action points that you might be able to take away to increase your sales and profits. So I'm delighted to welcome Nigel Hurley, Chief Executive of CarShop. After Nigel's presentation, we'll be joined on stage by Phil Williams, Managing Director and co-founder of Oodle Car Finance. We'll be able to take some questions, so please store them up, and we look forward to hearing from you. So straight away, over to you, Nigel. Thank you.
Thanks, Jonathan. Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. As Jonathan said, I'm the CEO of CarShop UK. Been with CarShop now for 4 years, joined in December of 19. They say timing's everything, and maybe if I'd got my hindsight, probably wouldn't have joined at that time, because obviously a few months later, we were mid-COVID. I've been asked today to share our story, really, as to how we've navigated through that period. I have to say, for a car supermarket, it's been the hardest and most difficult period, I think, that we've had to work to sort of manage through. So I'm going to share, I suppose, the story so far as we continue to manage through what has been a difficult period. Prior to being the CEO of CarShop, I was the Managing Director of the BMW division for Sytner. I've been with Sytner for 25 years. I ran their BMW Mini franchise for 15 years. And I joined the motor trade straight from school in August the 8th, 1983. So I'm an 83 on an A for those that can remember the old number plate. So I suppose I'm going to talk about who are CarShop, the changing landscape that we've gone through, how we've navigated through, and of course, how we've managed performance through that period, and a little bit of insight as to how we're seeing things as we look forward. And at the end, I believe there'll be a Q&A. So CarShop operate out of 13 locations across the UK. You can see the geography. We've got 4 preparation centres. We buy, we sell, and we prepare 60,000 cars every year. We've got 2 call centres, one that operates for inbound digital sales, so they'll handle all telephone inquiries, all email, all web chat, and we have a contact centre specifically to look after customers that have actually taken delivery of their car post-sale. We've got an external message about the home of good karma, spelled with a C, and we want to be positioned with our customers as an organisation that really cares about their customer, and the tradition of karma, when we give good, we want to receive good. Internally, our brand values are around grabbing the wheel and spreading good karma. And when we talk about grab the wheel, we talk about taking responsibility in the driving seat, making control and being proactive. And when we talk about spreading good karma, we talk about internal good karma, and we talk about good karma with our customers. So those 2 phrases reappear quite often when we talk to our staff about have you grabbed the wheel on that one and have you spread good karma. But what a landscape we've had to manage through. If I reflect back to 2019, the market was normal. OEMs were continuing to drive the market through their ambitions, almost fanatical at times, to get market share. That created lots of pressure on the main dealers to pre-registrations, churn their demos and loan cars frequently, and find alternative channels to get those cars into market, self-drive hire, leasing companies, and brokers. That created an abundant amount of used cars in that marketplace. Perfect hunting ground for people like car supermarkets and CarShop. Franchise retailers at that time only dominated the 0 to 3-year car park because their forecourts were full of cars that were 0 to 3 and ex-demos, ex-loan cars, and ex-staff returns, and pre-reg. However, that's changed significantly over the last 2 or 3 years. All their 4 and 5 and 6-year-old cars were actually then traded or sold to people like me, and that, again, provided a great source of used cars for our opportunity. There was very little national used car competition. lots of strong regional players, and that was healthy. But then in December, the first purely online retailer was launched, and that's when things started to change. For CarShop during 2019, it really was business as usual. We'd opened Bristol, that was our 10th store, and we got a real ambition to grow our footprint across the UK. And we were talking some significant growth, and we had ambitions to be quite large over that 4-year period, and how that changed. So, as I say, started in December 19. I was free of the shackles of the manufacturer, which was liberating. We were in charge of our own destiny, and we were foot to the floor. We were going to smash it out of the park. And then 3 months later, we were closed. And that was a shock. So we had to manage through a period where we had people on furlough, and then, of course, then we were partially open, and then fully open. And that sort of happened over that period of 2020-21. That created a huge amount of pent-up demand in the market. Customers were switching from new to used, and that created a used car price inflation. Over the period of the last 4 years, our typical standing value of our cars has grown by £4,000, which has made the affordability of some of that older cars more expensive for first-time buyers. Then the second purely online retailer was launched, and at the same time, new car supply was shrinking. Stock supply channels were starting to close down. Our channels with OEMs, our channels with leasing partners, our channels with self-hire drive were all starting to shrink, and also our channels with our franchise partners, because they were starting to retail cars a little bit older than 3 years old. At the same time, we'd got the pure online retailers who were very aggressive in the market, trying to gain traction, creating their brand, and trying to get some volume going. And that was done through heavy marketing and aggressive pricing. For CarShop, what that meant is that if you think about where we were as a car supermarket, we were very traditional in the way we operated. 50% of our customers would walk in the showroom and have an experience where they didn't know which car to buy, and 50% would have behaved in a way where they telephoned first or emailed first. Overnight, that completely shifted, and we had to reinvent ourselves to operate click and collect in a period of a 2-week window. So in the 2-week window, we'd gone from being quite a traditional operation to a purely online, where customers had to pay for a car in full before they came to collect their car. Now, if you think about the age profile of our cars, we operate in a 3 to 7, 8 year bracket. That's our heartland. And trying to convince a customer to pay in full for a car they've not seen, they've not driven, and collect it on the day was a challenge. But we've managed to do that, and 2.5 weeks later, we were selling 2,500 cars a month in that way. We then opened Nottingham, Wolverhampton, and Leighton Buzzard. I think we'd still got growth aspirations in our sites. And I don't think we'd really seen the impact of what COVID was going to do, because had we done so, we might have paused on some of those locations that were opening up. All the information we were looking at in terms of the data were telling us that older cars were very lucrative, and indeed they are. They were more in demand. The stock turn on those cars that were less than £10,000, £12,000 was very high. It was double digit. And the margins up front were very healthy. The finance penetration was very strong. So why wouldn't we get into older cars? So we all of a sudden widened our profile from 3 to 7 up until 100,000 miles and 10 years old. And 6 months later, we pivoted and moved back. And I'll talk about what we found, how we found it, and what we do now. So throughout 2022, we're now fully open. It's the first year when we think this is it. This is our opportunity to really stretch our legs and do a good job. But new car supply is still low. Franchise retailers have now expanded their own stock profile to look at cars 4, 5, and 6 years old. And that, again, made less cars in the market for car supermarkets. Used car supply continues to tighten. We have the volatility in the electric market. And, of course, looking down the track, and the agency model with Mercedes-Benz is about to come in January. And we're not really sure at that point in time what that means to used cars. And then, of course, the cost of living crisis hit severely in the sort of Q4 of that year. Where we were in CarShop during that period is that all our ambitions that we had for 2022 6 months in, had to change because we hadn't achieved anything like what we expected to. The volumes were there, but the margins weren't. The aftermath of the used cars that we were selling that were older was hurting it in different ways. One of them was in preparation. So our preparation department was stagnated through the heavier and more intensive prep on the older cars. That was the first thing that we saw. But we were prepared to accept that on the basis that the fruits of having those cars were worth it. But the aftermath in customer buybacks, the aftermath in post-sale goodwill was horrendous. And it really did cost us. And we did a cradle-to-grave exercise with every car that we'd sold. We looked at the margin that we made out of the car initially. We looked at the chassis margin we made, the finance margin, the add-on margin, and the part exchange margin. And we said, right, when we sold that car, that's what that car was worth to us. And then we evaluated the same margin on that car 6, 7 months down the line. And when you looked at the aftermath that caused, all of a sudden, what looked great actually looked horrendous. So we did a pivot. And in June of 2022, we decided to rein in our stock profiles. So we went back from 100,000-mile, 10-year-old cars. We then said, right, if we're buying in bulk, it's 50,000 miles and 5 years old maximum, because that's where the risk is. If we're taking cars in part exchange ourselves, well, we can individually scrutinise that car. We'll go out to 8 years and 80,000 miles. And if we're buying from Sytner Group, where again they're individually scrutinising those cars, we'll move out to 7 years and 70,000 miles. And that's where we stand today. The output of that has been we've halved our buybacks, we've halved our post-sale goodwill, we've improved our preparation capacity and speed, and we're making the same overall profitability. So looking back, that was quite a key moment for us where we thought used cars were an opportunity, and we realised that for us in our world, it really wasn't. But we also decided that we've got to reinvent CarShop, because CarShop has been built around being a very traditional used car operator. Customer walks through the door, we greet them, we sit them down, they go through a process, we qualify their needs, they go to a business manager, they go to a handover expert, and then they take delivery of their car. And we realised that we've really got to reinvent ourselves because that model was too heavily weighted with people. So we started in June of last year with a digitisation programme. We looked at everything that we do with regard to people and customers, and we started the process of using IT to take the weight out of our headcount. And in January of this year, we entered the year with 190 people less than we started the year before. And as we stand today, we've taken 300 heads out in the last 18 months without any impact on our volume or our performance with our customers. And that will continue in terms of trying to streamline the organisation to reinvent CarShop. So when I was sat around the boardroom table with my peers, they all felt like they were having a really great time. All making super margins out of their new cars. They got no pre-registration, they got no target pressure. Their used cars were not infected with the ex-demos, service loan cars and CBS cars. Having a whale of a time, making huge margins on new cars. And actually, it felt like they were on a ship, and as all ships, they all lift on a rising tide. That's where they were. However, I found myself at the helm of a sub and wasn't getting any impact of that rising tide at all. So fast forward to this year. Again, we came into this year quite nervous, having been through 2022, thinking that was the year we were really going to stretch our legs and do well. And we entered this year with a lower level of consumer confidence. The cost of living crisis had hit in the Q4 of the year before, and that had taken forward into January. At the same time, we were under pressure from our lenders to increase our APRs. So at the same time that the customers were feeling the pinch, we were increasing the costs, and that wasn't good news for volume aspirations. Equally so, as a retailer, we were actually having more costs ourselves on stocking interest. The interest we were charging our stock was going through the roof, and obviously our utility bills also. So all the good work that we'd done in CarShop to take cost out, through things that we couldn't control, that cost had gone back in, which put the pressure on again. As you know, agency model was launched with Mercedes-Benz in January, and we keep close to how that's going to sort of play out with regard to used cars with that brand and what that impact will have on the others as we go forward. Supplies remain unchanged. It's just started to ease as we've gone into the second half of the year, but really, it's still tight on stock. But what we have seen is we've seen the used car values deteriorating so fast. And in July of this year, we got on the scales and realised that we were overweight. We hadn't realised how overweight we were until we really sat down and said, look, we're just too overweight on cars. We need to get ourselves into good order. And we started our stock reduction plan in July, and we lost 3,000 cars out of the weight of our stock by the start of September. And really, for us, even though stock turn's been a key KPI for us forever, it's never been more important than right now. If we haven't got double-digit stock turn on our stock, right now, we're in trouble. And we see that continuing for the next few months. Our proposition to our customer, we realised that the cost of living was hurting them, our APRs were increasing across our competition, but we went the other way, and we moved our APR, rep APR, down by 2 or 3% in January. So we went into the year against the grain of our competition who were putting their APRs up. We pulled ours back, which cost us, but we also trimmed our prices. So we went into the year with a very aggressive price proposition and an aggressive APR proposition. The stock turn intensity, that's all we talk about today. If it's not double digit, we've got to do something. And we've had to try and find marginal gains. So an example of that would be in our preparation process and when we acquire cars. So if you're in a franchise dealer, day one is typically the day that the car's landed. In our world, when we're buying cars in bulk from the auctions and the suppliers, day one, the car sat at the auction house. So we have a period of time where we can't do very little with that car, as to get from the auction house into the preparation centre, through the preparation process, onto the web and onto the forecourt. So we've been looking at how we can streamline all of those little processes to try and make sure that the speed at which we get that car from hammer down to on the web is the fastest it can be. Other things we've done to navigate through, we've talked about older cars, privately owned cars, hugely competitive market. We have to buy and prepare 1,250 cars a week. So it's quite difficult when you're buying and selling in that kind of level, is finding cars that can help you. We self-generate around 30% of the cars that we need, so therefore we have to go out and find the rest. Privately owned cars, great source of margin, but very difficult to and very labour intensive to get hold of. So again, that remains both a challenge and an opportunity for us. But what we did do is we stretched where we could. So where we can self-generate part exchanges, we looked at pay plans, we looked at motivation and reward and measurement, and how we could get our teams to actually take more part exchanges in, and that's helped. Equally so, we've got the USP of having Sytner Group as a partner, and we make sure that we've given them a very simple and generous proposition to encourage them to buy more part exchanges themselves. But then we had to think about, over that period, what makes us different? And when you think about, we had Kazoo, we had Cinch, we had all our competitors that are out there that were sort of very competitive on price, super aggressive on marketing, and everybody talks about giving good service. And we were no different, really. But what we had to really do is think about what does make the difference. So we spent a lot of time listening to our teams, listening to customers, observing their feedback, listening to calls, understanding what we're saying, when we're saying it, how we're saying it, and working with our teams to try and improve that. We also have regular monthly management team check-ins. We have a teams meeting every month with every single manager in the division, where we have an hour where we talk about the customer experience, we talk about the scores in Google, the scores in Trustpilot, the negative reviews that we get in, the complaint levels that we've got, and we hold our teams accountable to make sure that they're delivering the very highest levels of customer satisfaction, because that is one of the differentiators that doesn't cost money, it just is time, process, and focus. We've also put a lot of effort into our colleague competence and skill. And what was really an eye-opener for me was when we talked to our team about giving effective feedback to colleagues that work for them, they really struggled because they become managers over time and they never really had any formal training, and so their reference point was always the manager that had managed them, not necessarily the manager that was going to get the best out of them. So we started talking about giving great feedback, helping people to understand when they've done something wrong, what they can do better, but that also led us into how to develop a good one-to-one, how we can actually get the best out of the people around us. And we continue to do some good work in that area as well. So focusing on the customer, focusing on our team, upweighting their skill and competence. I don't think we've been as agile as we are today. Every week, we have a Teams meeting with all of my senior team, and the first meeting of the week is to review the week that was and look at the week that's about to be. Look at all the touch points of our performance and think about what we can do to try and make a difference to improve that this week ahead. That includes marketing, it includes stock management, it includes preparation, and we really do put ourselves to task. In addition to that, every week, we look at our stock aging, we review every car that's over age, car by car. We look at every car that's actually had a cancellation on it to make sure that there's nothing wrong with the car. And it really is quite intense. And I think from an agility point of view, we've had to be super agile. And we really do work day by day, week by week. I think the other USP is how your stock's presented. So one of the things we did do early on is give our stores world-class photography solutions. So in the past, they would have had a car parked outside against a whiteboard for an image for the web. And that had to change. So we developed, every site has now got photographic, world-class photographic indoor solutions. So 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. You can photograph that car and it will be perfect. We've also looked at how we price our cars. That's something we do daily. And also our availability. What I also found was having 10,000 cars gave me no better result than having 5,000 cars, which was a real issue for me, because I couldn't understand why having twice as many cars didn't give me twice as many opportunities. But I think you probably reach a critical mass where 5,000 cars is enough, maybe. But our inquiry rate didn't really sort of hit a higher note because we had got 10,000 cars around us. All we did is we created ourselves an aging problem to solve. And of course, we've had to really look at our marketing spend and mix, where we spend our money, what the output of that spend is, and that again is an ongoing challenge for us. So I want to talk about my stool. So this could have been a chair, but it's a stool. And again, having come from franchise world where I only had to really worry about sales, that was it. Didn't have to worry about acquisition because 75% of the cars that we had, we took in part exchange. And actually, prep, well, that was the after-sales or service manager's problem, it wasn't mine. But actually, when you come to a car supermarket, you really quickly realise that the balance between acquisition, preparation, and the sales is critical. Each one of those legs in that stool has to be as sturdy as the other, else it falls over. And there are times in the year where we have to lean on one of the stool legs. So in the first half of the year, when sales are really pushing for the volume, prep's really got to come to the party, so is acquisition. In the second half of the year, you're pulling back on prep, you're pulling back on acquisition, and you're sort of trying to match the sales. So that was the first thing that we learned, was the stool is critical. And we review the stool every week. In terms of acquisition, I suppose we look at the channels, where we get the cars from, which create the fastest turn and the highest margin. We talked about the report that we built that gave us the cradle-to-grave analysis of what we're selling, what the real profit was, and was it worth it. We look at sectors, we look at brands, and we let data help us to drive our buying habits and behaviours. And we're looking at stock turn as the key measure there. Which stock is turning? It could be a model derivative, it could be an engine variant, it could be anything. And we look at that every single day. We've got a team of people that all they do all day long is review data, review sectors, review the brands, what's selling, why is it not selling. If it's selling fast, maybe we can get more margin. So a car that's selling at 13, 14, 15 times stock turn, maybe we've got a chance to increase margin on that car. But a car that's selling or turning at less than 8, maybe that car needs to be more price competitive, we need to accept less. So we look at that every single day. I think the other thing, which is a skill, and you don't always get this right, but trying to be ahead of the curve by using market intelligence and contacts to try and predict what's going to happen in the market. I think we called it right with regard to getting rid of a load of stock in July, and I think looking back, that was a good call. And we also called it, luckily, we were lucky really with this one, with electric cars, because we were starting to get on the verge of getting in more electric cars in our stock. We only have 3% of the stock that we hold is electric cars today, and we're about to get into it, and all of a sudden the market became more volatile, and we're glad we didn't. So I think the electric vehicle market is still a bit volatile, still opportunity in there, but we're not rushing ahead. We'll pick our times to be in and out of that sector at the moment. We also measure the performance of our buyers and our suppliers to spot opportunities where we can improve both margin and volume. So prep, big one here really is, what's the standard? Mechanical's quite easy, but when you get into cosmetic repair, you're into a situation where it's subjective. Every customer wants to turn up and see that car, and they want it to look like new. And we have that dilemma where sometimes we can't afford to make that car look like new. So we had to create the standard, communicate the standard, and then police the standard, and make sure that subjectivity is removed. High emphasis on quality control. So we've got lots of quality control checkpoints within the process, and we watch that like a hawk, because that's where we can get caught out with regard to customer buybacks or with post-sale goodwill. Talked about the speed of getting a car to market, trying to make that as fast as it can possibly be by looking at all the channels, and obviously managing cost per car. When we've got a situation where we find a car can't make the grade, we've got to get rid of that car swiftly, and it's same with trade stock, makes sense. And of course, we've talked about the focus on the imaging. Sales, well, it starts with a compelling proposition. Without that, you've got nothing. That could be the car, could be the price. Set the expectations and ambitions with the team, what we expect of them, how they can achieve that. And I've talked about grabbing the wheel and spreading good karma. Spent a lot of time understanding our customers, looking at each of the channels of our inquiries, figuring out how, if we were rating ourselves out of 10 in that channel, where would we be? And why would we be there? And what can we do to get that to be a 10? And that led us into the sort of deep dive inquiry management, because when we were talking to our teams and our heads of businesses about, are you good at inquiry management? And everyone thinks they're really good at inquiry management. But when you actually got into detail and you said, right, okay, let's have a look at inquiries that come through the telephone then. Let's have a listen to how fast it was before you rang that customer, what that conversation felt like, what it looked like, what was said, what was the outcome of that conversation. It was pretty disappointing. So we now do deep dive inquiry management on all channels every month as part of our routine. But that's been a great opportunity for us to actually coach our team to be better and do more. And of course, we've got to constantly keep our eye on our competition, and of course, keep reviewing ourselves. We've talked a little bit about that already in terms of managing stock, but no used car operation would be good without really focusing on the stock. Easy to say, buy the right cars, get to market quick with the cars, make sure the presentation, both online and the forecourt, is the best it can be. And this stock level is appropriate to ambition gets back to what I said before, is that just by having 1,000 cars on your forecourt doesn't give you the right to have 1,000 cars sold that month out of that location. And the two don't sometimes go hand in hand. So it's really managing your ambition and managing your stock level to make sure that you're not curtailing any opportunity, but at the same time that you're not actually creating yourself an overage problem. Pricing, well, today, that's all we do every single day, every single hour, is keep our prices sharp. We're probably significantly sharper now than we've ever been, which is hard because all that does is squeeze the margin. It keeps the stock turn going, keeps the prep centres busy, but it doesn't help us when we're trying to achieve a return in terms of margin. Aging, huge focus. We don't have a policy where we get rid of cars after 60 days, 90 days, 120 days. We manage through our stock, but we look at every car that's over 90 days in quite some detail. We go and inspect that car, we start that car, we make sure that it's got nothing that's stopping that car from being available for delivery today. I suppose finally looking forward really is to what we're looking at in general. New car supply is going to increase, albeit slowly. We are in the middle of a used car value correction, and we see that probably continuing. For the first time ever, we're worried about January. And usually we go into a January overweight and with stock, ready for the opportunity that's in front of us. And I think this is the first time where we're sat scratching our heads thinking, maybe that's not going to happen this year, and maybe going in lean is more sensible than going in overweight. So, look, week by week, we sort of scratch our heads on that one, but this could be the first year where January might not be as good as what it has been in the past. I call it the part exchange battle because we're now in competition to win the part exchange from the customer. Years ago, the customer had no choice. They either part exchanged the car and accepted the bid from the dealer or bought from somewhere else, or they went through the hassle and pain of selling their car on Auto Trader, which a lot of people didn't have the appetite to do. Today, if you're a customer with a part exchange, you're in a great place because we as the dealer are desperate for that car to retail or even to trade and make some money. So I think we'll be constantly in that battle where the customer will have choices that are outside of our control, where they can quite easily get a bid on their car that's attractive in a minute or 2 minutes, and I think that's, again, a battle we'll have to keep trying to win. We don't know what the franchise retailers' approach to 3-year plus will be. Maybe one day they'll get back to that kind of framework because their forecourts will be full again with cars they have to fill it with. But I suspect that will be a slow burn, and now they've not got used to selling 4- and 5-year-old cars, maybe that will continue for a while. Agency, we're still second-guessing what that might mean, especially where used cars are concerned. We've got to keep close to that. And of course, EVs. There's definitely a market for EVs from a new corporate point of view, because of the reason why you do that. But new retail is still struggling, and it's only happening through heavy investment from manufacturers to seduce customers into making that a really heavy value proposition. I suppose when that car now enters used cars and you've got a pure used car proposition, we see quite a degree of volatility, but also opportunity in that sector for some time to come. And of course, the pure online retailer question mark is will they be here in a year or two's time? We don't know. From our point of view, conscious but not consumed. It's good to be aware and to get concerned about what's happening around us, but you can sometimes allow that to consume you too much and worry about the things that you can't influence. So we talk a lot about controlling the controllables. What can we do? What can we do to navigate through this? What can we do to make that as good as it can be? What's in our control? And of course, keep focused on our team, our customers, and seeking out their marginal gains. I think that's it. Thank you. Thank you.
Nigel, thank you very, very much for such great insight into the way car shops facing up to the future. If I could kick off with a question to both of you. You mentioned your sort of uncertainty about the January market and how you prepare for the new year. Come March, that will be bang on 3 years since COVID hit and new car sales stopped. So just interested in how you see the supply of vehicles coming through next year and what opportunities that means for the market.
I think a little bit like what we saw in September, where it's the first month where we've seen quite a few part exchanges come in because the new car supply is starting to ease and get better. And I think we'll see that accelerate out slowly. So maybe in March, we'll start to see a few more cars coming in from main dealers, but we're years away, I think, from where we were in terms of the oversupply, where there was significant choice in the market for us to go out. And if you were good at buying cars 4 and 5 years ago, you were a good used car operator. And I think that landscape has just gone, and maybe gone for the next few years, I suspect.
And Phil, from your perspective, sorry, just to reintroduce, this is Phil Williams from Oodle Car Finance. From your perspective, interest rates are at record high since 2009. How do you see 2024?
Realistically, we've seen rate after rate increase, and we have no choice but to pass that on to the consumer. We've tried to hold down our prices as best we possibly can, but it's inevitable that has to go one way. However, I think when you look at things today, there's two world conflicts going on. Consumer conflicts at its lowest, consumer confidence at its lowest levels. I think it's going to be a tough start to 2024. However, I do think interest rates will have hopefully reached their peak, and we can start to see that feeding through to the consumer in the latter half of 2024.
Thank you. Does anyone have any? So, if you could just hold on, we'll just bring a microphone to you, sir.
I'm John Alex. What do you do with troublesome cars you can't sell? Troublesome cars give problems under finance.
Sorry, I can't hear. The speakers are facing the wrong way.
What do you do with troublesome cars you can't get through on finance and you can't sell on, and a customer buys a bad car and discovers they're going to be out of fortune and repair on finance charges?
I don't know whether you heard that. It was, what do you do with a troublesome car that the customer can't get finance for, or there's an expensive repair and it's just stuck in the system?
Yeah, I suppose the easy one is when we find the car is not commercially viable for us to repair because we've found something on the car during its preparation, or it's developed a fault that we couldn't have spotted when we bought that car, and we auction the cars. That's what happens. But you auction the cars, you declare it, and you face the pain. That's what happens. And that's quite expensive, and it's become more expensive now since the market's been moving south.
Right before, I was caught out before I bought a car and it was red with rust within a year and a half, 2 year old.
Okay.
That's 15 or 20 years ago. And I was ready to leave it back to a finance company, own the money, and saying I'm not paying any more on it.
I think the question was if the customer decides that they no longer want to pay finance because the car is problematic, and you reach that impasse between yourselves.
I think it's, I think generally the rule I've always followed in the last 20 years is your first loss is generally your best loss. I think where the customer is, you feel the customer is correct, I think it's in your interest to look after the customer and help them put the car right. And if this is we try and work with our introducers, and if there's a real problem car or there's a real problem customer, we'll try and split the difference with both the dealer, the customer, and ourselves as a finance company. The longer you leave problems out there, the worse it is for everybody. It doesn't do you any good in the end, reputational-wise and everything. It's just better to solve the problem.
Thank you. Nigel, you mentioned in your presentation that at the start of this year you reduced your finance rates by a couple of percentage points. I'm just interested, amid the cost of living crisis, what's achievable with finance to make cars more affordable, if not necessarily cheaper, but people are looking at monthly budgets? Are you seeing finance terms extend? What are the options?
Well, I suppose that decision for us was driven by wanting to improve our penetration, because we saw that the rates that we were charging, we weren't getting the finance penetration. At the same time, it was driven by a requirement to get more volume. And we thought that the compromise, because our rates with our lenders were going up, not coming down, or even staying the same. So we had to make a commercial decision that against that backdrop, we were going to sacrifice some finance income at the expense of a higher finance penetration and at the expense of some increased volume, which I'm pleased to say we did get. But I think we're in that place where cost of living, affordability, I can't see the light yet in terms of when will be a place when we will have margin-rich cars that we can afford to sit on. I can't see that. That seems too far away. And I think from a finance APR point of view, I think we'll just make sure that we're with the pack, and I suppose that our competitors, when they move one way, we've got to be able to consider that, and when they move the other way, we've got to do the same.
Phil, how about yourself? What type of arrangements are you seeing?
Well, we've continued to support our introducers, and with the aging car park out there, we've started to finance. Even 12 months ago, we started to finance older cars and higher mileage cars to support our introducers. But as Nigel was saying, there's a direct correlation between older, high mileage cars do give you more problems, and so you have to keep some money back in reserve to repair those cars when they do go wrong. Having said that, I think now consumers now are looking for bargains everywhere. I think it's good that we make sure that everybody can afford these car loans for the duration of the agreement, and that's certainly what we're looking at and supporting our existing customers.
Thank you. Do you have any other questions from the floor? Sorry, I'll just see if there's another question, sir, before I come back to you. Thank you.
Yeah, Nigel, sorry. I'm Michael Tomlin from the City Auction Group. Just firstly, wanted to say thank you for the very open and honest overview. It was very interesting for the last 3 or 4 years, because there is no doubt it's been a challenging period for everybody. There's been some ups, there's been some downs. We work quite closely in our business with your business and the car buying team. Just wanted to say they're very professional, they're very credible, and yeah, that was a good overview. Just in regard to pricing, I just wanted your thoughts really, because we're obviously monitoring it closely as well. We've seen, in the last few months, probably a 10% reduction in current used car values. We're being told quietly in the background that we can see probably in the next 2 months, November into December, December into January, a very similar 10% drop prior to getting into the January, February, March period, which for 35 years has been very, very buoyant in vehicle marketing. I've been in for 35 years. I've not seen yet, going through 2 recessions, a January fall on its face. You mentioned it could, which anything could happen, I think, at the moment in the automotive industry. But I just wanted to understand your thoughts in regard to if prices do fall as suggested, another 10%, do you think that'll mean from January we'll jump off the starting blocks well? Will retail jump off the starting blocks as it usually does? And what are your thoughts, really?
Yeah, well, look, the prices are a symptom of supply and demand. And I suppose the reason why October dropped by 4.2% in cap for the 3 to 5 year old market was the demand wasn't there. And I think that's continued to November. I think we're thinking it's going to be 4, 5, 6% maybe in November. Why would December be any better? So I think it's going to be a difficult market between now and Christmas. I think if they then take that depreciation, the cars will reach a point at some point where the demand increases because all of a sudden they look great value. We saw that with Tesla when the electric vehicle market fell apart. We went from being a problem to an opportunity. And I think no doubt that will happen. So whether or not by Christmas we're in that phase where all of a sudden the cars have reached a point where they become value again, maybe January will be as good as it always is. But I think it's all that. It's easy to say, but it is that supply and demand conundrum. And there's a correction that's required. With that £4,000 average SIV that we've experienced, that's got to come down. And it has done already. So I think that we're scratching our heads, but I think we'll see this continue into December. It could even continue for the first time ever into January, until they reach a point.
Phil, do you have anything to add?
Yeah,
we'll come back to you, sir.
We're definitely seeing the average lend that we're doing falling. Customers are shopping around more for bargains now, and they're more aware of monthly payments than they ever were. But I think consumers now, it's been remarkably resilient, really. Bearing in mind we've got 2 conflicts going on, we've got a cost of living crisis. I think the first half of the year has been remarkably resilient in the car trade. I think we are seeing a softening now. Consumer confidence is just starting to dip a bit. It was always going to happen. It's just how long that happens for. I think now the Bank of England are well aware that if they tip it too far, then we're going to be entering a recession. But surely next year we're probably looking at an area of, I would say, stabilisation is probably the best way we can say it.
Thank you. So we are on a quick timetable, but yes. So
all I was going to say was one question. Do you foresee the retail sector from Q1 January? Do you think that with what's currently going on in the economy with pricing of fuel and cars and property and everything changing, I mean, there's talk about repricing, is another word really in reality for recession, if that's correct. But we don't want to use that word just now. But do you think the consumer will be out there looking to buy cars well in Q1?
I do think so. I think there's always people that need a car. And I think we saw that when we went through COVID and 2,500 cars a month. We wouldn't have sold those cars if people didn't need a car. So I think there's still going to be a majority of customers that need a car. But then I suppose when people see value in the market, that's when people will come out and start to buy. So look, we always set off, we have done the last 2 or 3 years, the first 2 weeks of January, and we hope we're going to be amazing, aren't. This tail where it sort of lifts in week 3, and then we're off, for the first half of the year. So hopefully it'll follow the same pattern.
I hope so too, yeah, for sure.
Okay. Well, thank you very, very much. I'd like to thank Nigel from Car Shop and Phil from Oodle. I hope you found it interesting. It was a terrific presentation. Thank you.